Welcome to the KitchenAid Fairway Club. We are all in for quite a treat, literally, with our next chef demonstration and the first chocolatier to grace the stage this week. Ronnie Watchorn is the owner of American Inheritance Confectionary, a chocolate shop bringing native flavors, traditions, and history to the American confectionery world. Ronnie's confectionery journey began in 2015 when the sudden death of his wife left him unemployed and training under a local chocolatier. Ronnie learned the European techniques of chocolate making before opening his own shop in the childhood town of Coweta, Oklahoma. Using these learned techniques, Ronnie creates a myriad of tastes that use local, sustainable foods to combine American ingenuity with European tradition. In 2019, American Inheritance was accepted into the Kitchen 66 launch program, an incubator in Tulsa. In 2021, Ronnie moved his Coweta store to Main Street in Broken Arrow, where he now offers interactive classes, monthly subscription boxes, and culinary creations he's become known for in the region. Through his business, Ronnie aims to create more than just chocolate, but a historical journey through the landscape of local food. Please welcome Ronnie to the stage.
Hi. So, my name is Ronnie. Obviously, that was just stated several times. I own American Inheritance. Today, we're going to be making a salted caramel milk chocolate tart. I wanted to keep it something like relatively familiar and safe that is like easily replicated at home. So, that's it. I'm going to start with pecans. And while this is happening, do any of you guys have any questions about any of this? I had lost my job. And it's something that like I had never really had any interest in chocolate. I'm more like a sour reference, but they kind of realized that after that shop sold, I wasn't really done with it because I had like a really weird emotional connection to it. So that's where American Inheritance was born. So I'm roasting pecans because it's just you always roast the nuts because they taste so much better.
So today, what you're making, is it locally from Broken Arrow, or is it?
I'm using local ingredients, yes. I was really trying to keep this to something that people can easily source and make already. So like in the shop where like we're just talking about like the native flavors, I use a lot of kind of different stuff. Like I work with a lot of honeysuckle, a lot of dandelion, a lot of like more obscure like.
Versatile, unique.
Yeah. I kind of aim to bring the concept of like a regenerative food cycle outside of like what people typically look at it as, because there's so many broader uses of stuff that people aren't actively, like when people find out I use honeysuckle, they're just like, wait a minute, honeysuckle? I'm like, yes, it is amazing. So, but yeah, so no, this is all, I do have some local honey from Hannaford Honey. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they're amazing people. So, and then I've got some sea salt from a shop in Sand Springs. But the rest of it is more or less stuff that you can find at the store just to make it easier to recreate when you guys get home. So with the pecans in the oven, I'm going to move and get the caramel layer started, because we're going to start with that. And so you're going to use approximately 10 ounces of caramel. It just kind of depends on how big of a batch you want to make. And then when I wrote the recipe, I wrote for half a cup of cream, but I'm really bad at just eyeballing things, because yeah, it just goes better that way for me. So we're gonna get this started. Now, I had originally intended on having my 8-year-old with me today. So I wanted to keep it relatively friendly to that age group, but he elected to not show up at the last minute. So I'm using a creamed honey in the caramel, and it gives it like a really nice flavor. That said, you can easily leave this out and substitute your cream for Bailey's, and it turns into a completely different treat, and it's amazing. One thing I did not think to look for, where's spoons? Yeah, all right. So we're gonna get the caramel going, and as soon as I get a spoon, I will get the honey added in to where it all kind of goes. So the way that this tart is constructed is effectively there's a layer of caramel at the bottom, and then from there there's gonna be a layer of milk chocolate, and then some like pecans and toffee and stuff. So in place of using like just store-bought chocolate, I can't talk, sorry. I have a line called the Signature Series, and that is where like I use a lot of it that I make in shop in place of baking chocolate, because it's a plain chocolate flavor that I don't know, I think it's better, but I'm slightly biased. You can. It's available in shop and online. I actually just moved my shop to Broken Arrow, and I am not effectively open yet. I'm hoping to have that finished by June. So moving quickly. Do any of you have any experience in chocolate, or like? I'm assuming y'all are students, right? Okay. And so you guys had really good questions in the last one too. So I was like, they've got a background here.
We like to ask the questions, and sometimes people don't like asking them, so they get very quiet.
How easy is it to make chocolate for a normal home?
Yeah, it's a process. I mean, you can buy like the Candy Quick or the glazes, and like that stuff, it's literally just a melt situation. But chocolate itself has to go through a tempering process. Otherwise, you end up with like a really waxy product that just from the cheaper alternatives. The tempering process, you effectively bring it to like a high temperature, a low temperature, and then like settle out in the middle, and that allows all the crystallization to occur properly and everything else. And so, I don't know if you guys can see this up there. I can't, but that's starting to melt. And today we are just using these little craft caramels because they're really easily attainable. And yeah. And then the honey that I used, I am really partial to Hannaford honey just because I know the people and they're like some of the best. But that is available at the Rose District Farmers Market. So I don't know if you guys ever get a chance to go out there, but if you do, that's where you can get this. So letting that get going.
Ronnie, what's the thing that people order from you the most?
Whiskey caramel. I have 4 different flavors. They are all kind of based around different historical people, ranging from presidents to, there's one lady named Stagecoach Mary, and I read her story and I kind of fell in love with her. She was born a slave in Tennessee, and she bought her way to freedom and then moved as far north as she could. And I think she was like 83. She was still running a mail route on like a horse and buggy with a shotgun in hand, and they had to like forcibly retire her because she just was not ready to give that up. So she's a really fun story. And then, but they're all kind of based like that. And so, yeah, there's the Frank Phillips, the Roosevelt, Stagecoach Mary, Pushmataha, who is a Choctaw chief. And I really like butter, so adding probably more than is healthy there, but it's fine. And so this is going pretty well. I'm gonna check those real quick.
Is the butter just in there for flavor purposes?
Basically, yeah, because I mean caramel already has a lot of butter in it, but butter. So, take these I don't. I actually use tempering machines typically, just because it's more precise and guarantees the product every time. You could definitely, yes. For this, it's just like much quicker and easier to use it like direct, and then I mean, all you have to do is stir it. So it's really not like something that's like going to be complicated. Yeah. So, what kind of like chocolate history do you guys have? Like this, I know you guys said you had it.
So we are currently in a showpieces class that does chocolate, dead dough, and ice. We do, or ice sugar. Who's done that? She's done pouch chocolate. Yeah.
Okay.
We've done an advanced baking class that does bonbons, truffles, those kinds of things. I've experimented at home. I love chocolate.
Yeah.
I use it in a lot of different things. But I do store bought. I have not gotten to experience the actual process of making chocolate. I have seen it done and really want to, and I haven't done it.
Are you talking like bean to bar, or are you talking about just okay?
Straight off of the tree.
Yeah.
The whole like fermentation process and all of it. I'd love to experience it. Haven't gotten a chance to.
I want to say that there's only like 100 and, like I think 140 something shops that actually do that worldwide. So that's a really interesting process. So- for this purpose, no. Like honestly, like I said, you could just throw this in the microwave, and it's like it turns out just as well. Like I don't like to let it sit once it gets boiling, because then you'll get like little like burnt crystals in there, and that, yeah. But and then brown butter is actually another really good addition to this. But yeah. So, following that, gonna kind of let that sit for a minute and just cool down a little bit. And I'm not gonna grab that with a bare hand. Been there, done that. Going to get some of these in here. And you're not going to want to like process all of them, like chop them all up really fast, because at the end you're going to use some of them as a garnish, and yeah. Having a little bit of texture there, a little bit of difference, always ends up looking really nice. Keep clicking that. So do you guys have a like a favorite chocolate out of everything? Like what's the one that you guys are like really fond of? Every. Yeah. Okay. Okay. See, I've always thought like, oh, I really like milk chocolate, or I really like white chocolate. And then the more that I actually started working with it, I figured out that dark chocolate is so much more versatile when you're working with it, because it like really amplifies certain flavors and brings out certain flavors, whereas milk chocolate will wash it. And so these, you're just gonna kind of sprinkle them in to your taste. There's not really a right amount. So. Get that mixed in pretty well. And this still, like I said, you want to let this cool, but it's also going to go in the freezer, so that helps. Okay, so that's done. And then you're going to want to pour this to approximately halfway, depending on how much caramel to chocolate ratio you want, halfway to 3/4. And that will, sorry, I cannot talk and pour caramel apparently. And so that gives you like a really nice like base layer, and the pecans and everything that are in there help a lot. So this is a sweet tart shell. I'm sorry, I should have said that earlier. I used, my shop is not set up as like a patisserie. So I'm using a store-bought tart shell. And again, that makes it like really easy so that you guys can recreate this because it's all available. So kind of top them out. That one needs a little bit more. There we go. So at my shop, we actually do, it's not bean to bar, but we actually do classes where you can come in and make chocolate from scratch. And so it starts with like the cocoa butter base and everything, and it's already like processed, obviously. But so.
Ronnie, can you tell us a little bit more about the classes?
Yeah. First off, this is actually this salt that I'm using right now. It's a vanilla bean sea salt. I got it from a shop in Sand Springs, and it's like amazing with caramel because it lends to that vanilla flavor already, and it's really good. As far as the classes are concerned, I do a variety of different kinds. I do things like aimed at kids. Like I actually have a summer camp coming up for the next, is it this week? Next week? The 7th to the 11th. And that's going to focus on just letting kids kind of play with chocolate and create. It's all kind of science-based. So a lot of like STEM stuff as far as like looking at the chemical reactions in it and like doing like some like solar oven stuff. So that's a lot of fun. I kind of targeted 8 to 12 just because I feel like that's that's when the attention span starts to develop enough to like really like mess with the stuff. So let me get this thrown in the freezer real quick. Okay, so now we're going to start the ganache portion of this while that is chilling. And do you guys know like the difference between, say, like a truffle filling and a ganache filling or any of that stuff? Like, are you guys familiar with any of that? No. So a truffle filling more traditionally has a butter involved in it, whereas a ganache is just milk and cream. Or milk and cream. One and the same. Chocolate and cream. And so this I'm going to be using, I think I called it a ganache when I started, but I'm actually adding butter. So this is a truffle filling that's being used as a layer for this. And these pieces are all out of like the signature line that I discussed earlier, but you can use just like store-bought chocolate as well. I don't recommend using like baking chocolate unless you really like bittersweet, just because it does take such a precedence in flavor there. So I recommend using like a quality chocolate. I'm mixing milk and dark in this instance. That way it's not super sweet. But sorry, these are really not easy to open. But so do you guys have any questions as far as like what we're doing right now? Like where this is going? I'm gonna say it's a third dark. So like the standard bars are 4.5 ounces and these are like 1.5 ounces. So effectively you have 2 milk and 1 dark. So, but that again, it really comes down to like whatever you're comfortable with or whatever your like taste preference, I guess would be the word. I like she said earlier, I trained in a shop after everything kind of went sideways there for a minute, and it kind of gave me my ground zero. And that, like, I've taken classes since then, but that's really like the gist of where it all came from. So otherwise, I do a lot of reading about like the food cycles and like certain things that I want to use, like I know that I want to use, and then I find ways to make it work. So I don't know how much of that answers that question, but that's the one. Yeah, so the classes outside of the summer camp that we have coming up, We do like build your own bar nights to where like everybody comes in, they get a mold, and then there's, you know, you have toppings set out, and you get to build these bars, so they're the big ones. And it usually, it's about a 2-hour class. There's complimentary wine, but it's really just kind of like a really fun environment. Like there's not a whole lot of like technical know-how involved. I usually do a brief history of chocolate and kind of like tasting, so to speak, of a few different things, like we talk about the first candy bar and how it was effectively just cocoa butter and cocoa powder and mashed together. So I try to get like the darkest thing I can get and let people taste it. Kids especially are a lot of fun to do that with because they like their reactions are so, adults try to meter their reactions, but kids are just like, what have you done to me? So it's always really entertaining. Yeah. Those do pair really, really well with coffee though. So again, I'm really just kind of eyeballing this because once this gets boiling, it's going to go over top of the chocolate. And that is a lot of butter though. So when it comes to the cream and the butter, you don't want to boil it. You want it to kind of start to, and then you want to get it off the heat. That way it doesn't scorch, because you'll taste that, and it's not fantastic. So. Take these out. So. Yeah, I feel like I went quiet there for a minute. So do you guys have any questions as far as like chocolate history or whatever? Do you guys have any idea like where chocolate actually started, how it got to where it's at today? Further south. Yeah, it was like the South America, Mexico, like right there. And that was in the Mayan and the Aztecs, and they used it as, like, it initially started out as like a gift to the gods, and then it became like the drinking chocolate. And then with the conquistadors, it ended up going back to Europe. And do you know where any guesses where the first chocolate bar came from? Or who created it? No, Hershey's is very young in the chocolate game. You probably do know them, yeah. Like they're still in production today. Yeah, so it was I think his name was Joseph Fry, and he ended up being a partner in Cadbury. So, but yeah, it was just a raw cocoa. So if you can imagine like 100% dark chocolate, that's pretty close to where you were at with that. And then milk chocolate came in, I want to say that was about 50 years later, and then it just kind of kept going from there. But interesting thing about Hershey's is it got to a point that he could not afford to pay his employees a living wage because they were in the middle of the Great Depression and everything else. And so he actually built a town around his factory for all of his employees to live in. So that was kind of his way to combat like the rising costs of everything, is like allowing them to live there. And if I'm not mistaken, it actually had a theme park as well. Yeah. Like that's really cool in my opinion. I want to get out there, but so. And then the artisan chocolate scene really didn't make its way to America until the early 2000s. And like that's where we started to see a lot of that come in. I'm just gonna pour this over top here. Set that off the heat. Use a cutting board to cover it up. So, yeah, for those of you guys that are just showing up, we are making a salted caramel chocolate tart. So, but yeah. So have you guys, I'm assuming you've been out there. Oh, okay.
My family we drove right past it, and I was very upset. But it is a very beautiful park. It's huge, and they have all different kinds of chocolate tastings, and they have like a chocolate wine pairing that you can do. They have a lot of stuff out there.
That's really cool.
Definitely a chocolatier's dream,
Yeah.
and I do want to go and experience it at least once in my life.
So, do you guys know the difference between like the American chocolate and the European chocolate? Like, yeah. Where would you guys assume the differences would lie for the most part? Kinda. So, American chocolate has a lot more wax content to it, actually. So, a lot of like the Belgian and the Swiss chocolate, like it doesn't have that wax content to it, and that's why it's a lot creamier, and that's why it requires the tempering. So, trying to get this to melt down so we can get it poured. But yeah. And then do you guys know why Europe is like the peak of like the chocolate industry? It's really comes down to like the temperature and the climate control, everything where they're at, because they're set humidity, temperature wise, they're like perfect. And most of them, like they do it, and like a lot of people do it in their houses even. So
their overall climate has a lot to do with it.
yes. And then the we talk about that in some of our classes, and then it sorry. Like if you're into chocolate history, it's a lot of fun to just kind of like sit there and go through it all, and then kind of taste your way through it. So following that, like I said, we do a subscription box, and that every month has a theme. And so, like the first one that we did was the Lone Star State, and it was all about like travels through Texas and finding the Texas flavors. The second box was folklore, because I'm kind of a folklore nerd, and so a lot of it was just exploring the different characters and finding a way to like tell their stories through chocolate. So the one that I'm working on right now, this month's box is Oklahoma, because I really didn't expect to have a lot of like out-of-state subscribers, and so I wasn't going to do an Oklahoma box because everybody's already had the flavors here. But they ended up shipping nationwide, so it was really cool to like see that. And so doing an Oklahoma box has been a lot of fun because it let me play with a lot of like the indigenous flavors that we were talking about earlier. So no. Like I see that, and it's modeling chocolate though, and modeling chocolate. So it's I started out like everything I did was molded, but I found that like just with like my demographic, they prefer like just like the simpler like bonbon shapes, because it kind of rings a little bit more true to the American heritage where it comes from. So I've had a few learning curves in there as far as like how to like reach the target demographic, and that was one of the things that really surprised me, because I got a lot of like, it's really pretty, but I don't necessarily know what to do with it. So I think people connected to like the more, yeah, otherwise it became something that's just like, well, that's a special occasion thing. So, and then I'm actually going to, is there a microwave? Oh, okay. I'm actually going to put this in the microwave for a minute just because it is not wanting to melt down all the way. And because it is a ganache, you don't have to worry about the temperature like that. So. All right, well, that's in there. Does anybody have any questions? I want to focus on getting the one that I have open first. It's been a lot different trying to open this one because it's not a traditional storefront. It's more of a class structure. And so that has made it kind of interesting to kind of look at and see where that's going to, like how that's going to fit as far as like structuring the actual store itself. But it's always a lot of fun. We do like the charcuterie classes. I don't know if you guys have seen much of those, but it's all like, one was a s'mores kit, and one was a hot chocolate kit, and I'm trying to think what else we've done. But it's just like, so you have like a box that's entirely built around the concept of whatever that dessert is. And so those are fun. We do, like I said, the build your own bar classes. We just did macarons with mom for Mother's Day. And so those are a lot of fun. But, okay. Now that is melted. So where did there we go.
Ronnie, you said your son was in the cake baking.
Oh, yeah.
Tell everyone about that and how old your son is.
So I have an 8-year-old who, he will tell you that he has surpassed my flavor palette at 8 years old. And he opened his own little farmer's market business called Sunny Day Cakes. And so he likes to do, like, he gets these little like cake square tins and he does all his little cakes. And then he works, like his favorite flavor is, it's a lemon cake, and then he uses a lemon curd. And it's got a lavender buttercream on it. And that's not something I would have eaten in a million years, especially not at 8 years old. But that's what happens when you let your kid watch the Food Network constantly. So it's a lot of fun. And it gives him a sense of pride in what he's doing, and he learns more about it and everything else. So here we're just filling these the rest of the way with this truffle ganache, whatever you want to call it. And then after this, I'm going to top it with more of the pecans. And like I said, this is where you don't want to chop all of your pecans at once, because I don't know, I like the textural differences. And then, sorry.
Do you chop your pecans with a food processor, or do you just use a knife?
That depends. So, like, if I'm at home, I use a knife just because, like, I don't keep a lot of the equipment like that at home. But if I'm in the shop, then I have all the equipment right there. And so I usually just use the processor. But that also goes back to, if I'm at the shop, I'm also trying to move a lot quicker. So, and then down here, I have toffee bits. Again, these are available in the baking aisle. It's trying to make this really accessible. So, and I don't like to cover the entire thing. I don't know. I always try to do something like relatively aesthetic. So, I like to go around the edges. And then you can take some of like the chopped up pecans. This one is a little full. Like, I feel like that one had a bit more caramel than the other ones. So when dealing with like the dessert world, like what's your go-to? Like what do you like to make?
Everything.
Everything.
Or
Yeah.
More of a bread, pastry, cream puffs.
I love
I
bread.
do like truffles and bonbons. Those are really fun to make, but I like to try to play with the flavors. And chocolate makes me nervous with trying different flavors and those weird, unique ones. I just haven't worked with them enough. With experience and time, I will.
One of the things that I really like about working with chocolate is the fact that like it gives you, I feel like because there's so many different varieties of it, it gives you a lot of like wiggle room when it comes to trying with flavors. Like, trying to think what's in the subscription box this month. There's a strawberry honeysuckle. There's a dandelion ganache where it's a milk and white ganache that's like infused with the dandelion infusion. And then there's blackberry and honey. Like there's just so many different combinations that you can do, and it's a lot of fun. And then I don't know if you guys, do any of you work with like flaky salt or use flaky salt at all? It's called Maldon or Malden, whatever. I call it flaky salt, and it's life. You can put it on chocolate chip cookies, all sorts of stuff, and it's available in a lot of different flavors. I like the smoked one personally. And so then from here, these you don't serve them right away. I don't know, can you guys see that? You don't serve them right away, and typically you wait a little bit longer to put the salt on because as you can see, it kind of dissolves. You're gonna want to chill those for about an hour before they're like ready to go. Otherwise, it all kind of runs everywhere. But yeah. So, do you guys have any questions?
Do you have any do not do's for new bakers or chocolatiers that are looking into getting into it? Any tips or like don't do's or anything from your experience?
Don't jump in head first. Like, do your research, obviously. Know what you're wanting to do, like what direction you're gonna want to do, because everything becomes very specific in a very short period of time. A lot of target demographic research, but like, are you talking more like technique-wise, or are you talking more like?
For home bakers who want to like start working with chocolate a little bit more, but don't want to pay for the classes or don't want to take as much time to research things.
Yeah.
Kind of just want to jump in head first, I guess.
So I mean, you can find a lot of really great melting chocolates that like you're not gonna get that like real chocolate taste, but it's enough to get through what you're doing. It's the difference between the melting chocolates and the tempering chocolate is one is made with like a vegetable oil versus a cocoa butter, and so that really kind of like inhibits a lot of the creamy textures that you would expect. But you can get a lot of those that are, I mean, they're perfectly fine just for home use and stuff like that. So, but it's kind of like the last people said. There's 1,000 different machines, 1,000 different gadgets, thousands of everything else, and you don't really need any of that stuff. Like, especially if you're just doing it for yourself, unless you want it. So don't feel like you have to jump in with all of that, because I mean, I bootstrapped this thing all the way from the beginning all the way through. So it's all very doable with or without thousands of dollars of equipment. You just have to kind of like figure out what you're doing, where you're going, and how you're going to get there.
Do you have any recipes that spark your interest that might spark a video?
So actually, every month in the subscription box, there is a recipe card. This one, the theme for this box is Oklahoma, like I talked about, and so like a lot of like the flavor profile that I worked with was just called indigenous, and I think it was primarily a Cherokee recipe, but it's kind of spread. You can find it on like the Choctaw website. You can find it on a lot of the different websites, but it's called grape dumplings, and so that's the one that's in this box, and so it I tend to post all of that online as well. So it's all online at AmericanInheritanceConfectionary.com. So it's a mouthful, but yeah. So did you guys have any other questions about the recipe today or any of the other ones? I mean, yeah, you've got a lot of places that are like, I mean, I have a wholesale supplier that I go through that, I mean, I work with them and they find me like, you know, we talk about what the product that I'm wanting to make is, and then they tell me like, all right, well, we have this variety for this, we have this variety for this, we have this variety for this. And so they work with me on like that level to like get me the products that I need, because I mean, a lot of it's not readily available here. And so it's like the stuff that I use today, I import all of my stuff from Switzerland. And so that's where all of that comes from. And then I work with it in-house and I make what I want out of it. So. Yeah. I'm not really sure of any that are open like to the public. The ones that I deal with are like business to business. I know that, I mean, there's a lot of, even Sprouts right now, actually, they've got the ruby chocolate, they've got the golden chocolate, they have different like couvertures, but again, it all has to be tempered. That's the biggest thing. If you're doing stuff like this, it does not have to be tempered. But yeah, you're gonna go ahead and pull these out. I don't know how set they are at the moment, but you get the idea. And these are ready to go. I'm sorry? So I'm not set up as a patisserie, so I actually use a store-bought crust for these. So, yeah, like you can, like they have them at Walmart in the baking aisle. They have them at like grocery stores, Reese's, Trader Joe's, etc. So it's just like little pie crusts, but this is more of a shortbread. But yeah. That.
Nice job.